Unit Introduction from Realism to Post-Impressionism. The Industrial Revolution caused an astounding transformation of society and daily life in 19th century Europe and in the United States. Artists responded to the scientific advancements of the age in different ways. Some painters initially favored an almost photographic realism in their works. Others rebelled against modern technology by deliberately cultivating a more whimsical flair. Architects not only developed forward-looking styles, but also took advantage of new materials and mass production techniques to build structures that would have been impossible before the 1800s. And this picture right here is called Le Moulin de la Jalette. It's by Pierre-Auguste Renoir. Oil on canvas, 1876. New materials and technology. The technological advances of the Industrial Revolution had a profound effect on art and architecture. The Industrial Revolution gave birth to an entirely new art form, photography. Some masters of the traditional paint and canvas medium embraced a new realism in their work based on the photographic model. Meanwhile, time-honored architectural styles gave way to new designs that accommodated the changing dynamics of the modern world. This photograph right here, this is actually pretty important. You need to remember this as one of the very first photographs. And it was not at that time called photography. It was a daguerreotype. This is from 1837. It's called The Artist's Studio. It's by Louis-Jacques Mandet Daguerre. A new age for art. Into the modern age. The Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain in the late 1700s. Steam power, fueled by the region's abundant coal reserves, was harnessed to mass-produce goods, initially textiles, that had up until then, been fabricated manually by hand. It didn't take long for this new technology to spread. Soon, steam engines were being used in mines, ironworks, sawmills, and other areas of manufacturing across Europe and in North America. Mechanization in industry kindled a similar transformation of the transportation sector. Iron-hulled steamships cut transoceanic travel time significantly, while on land, the steam locomotive presented a cheap, quick, and efficient means of moving passengers and freight. The 19th century also produced a communications revolution. The invention of the telegraph and later the telephone offered instant transmission of information as well as personal messages over great distances. Mass circulation newspapers sprang up in almost every town and city, and the new art of photography provided pictures to go with the stories. Explore the modern age activity on the next screen to learn more about advances during the Industrial Revolution. And in this photograph here, or painting, we have, fueled by coal, factories producing a wide variety of goods sprang up in Europe and North America. The modern age. Coal-fired steam engines began to replace sails for powering ships at sea. Water mills and steam engines powered mechanical looms in textile factories. Steam locomotives could help transport large quantities of goods over long distances. The telegraph allowed for almost instantaneous communication across vast distances. Daily newspapers kept everyone informed about current events. Daguerreotype photography provided images with a degree of realism previously thought to be impossible. Shrinking globe and urbanization. The overall effect of these pioneering breakthroughs was to shrink the globe and bring people closer together for better and for worse. European countries used their technological advantage to conquer and colonize vast territories in the non-industrialized world. Slave labor in the American South provided cotton for the era's burgeoning textile mills. Plentiful jobs in urban factories led to a rural exodus to cities from farms and small towns, putting a terrible strain on cities to provide large-scale housing accommodations, office buildings, and public venues. Innovative architectural designs to meet these new needs would represent a radical departure from styles that had come before. Here we have a painting. Slave labor and the invention of the cotton gin allowed the American South to meet England's increasing demands for cotton. Louis Daguerre. Born in France in 1787, Louis Daguerre was an accomplished painter, printmaker, and set designer. He had a flair for the dramatic and opened a theatrical venue called the Diorama in 1822. Visitors to the diorama viewed scenes that seemed magically to change before their eyes. The effect was achieved when sunlight was directed through a series of skylights, mirrors, shades, and other devices, and then directed to shine through transparent layers of painted images and projected onto a wall. By changing the transparencies in this large camera obscura, a bright, sunny mountain village scene might be converted into a snowy vista as if the seasons had changed. While the public marveled at Daguerre's ingenuity, he worked on finding a way to make the temporary images permanent. In 1837, after years of experimentation and collaboration with his colleague Joseph Niepce, Daguerre produced a sharp, permanent photographic image called the Daguerreotype. Camera obscura. The basic structure for all cameras: a darkened chamber pierced with an opening, which is sometimes fitted with a lens. Light reflected from objects outside the chamber passes through the opening to form an image on the opposite surface. Daguerreotype, an early form of photography in which an image is transferred to a metal plate. Louis Daguerre perfected the first viable process for making permanent photographic images. Camera obscura. Since the late Renaissance, painters such as Albrecht Dürer and Johann Vermeer had used the camera obscura as an artistic tool. Camera obscura means dark chamber, and that is literally what it is. The dark chamber may be as big as a room or just a box. It has a small hole, sometimes fitted with a lens on one side, that allows light to enter. Inside the box or room, opposite the opening, there is a place to mount paper or some other material upon which the light entering the box can fall. Step 1. Light from the sun. A lamp or other source reflects off an object or scene and passes through the opening in the camera obscura. Step 2. The reflected light projects an upside down or inverted image of the object or scene onto the paper or other surface on the opposite side of the chamber. Step 3. The artist may then trace the inverted image. When the tracing is done, the resulting image may be removed from the chamber, turned right side up, and used as an aid in creating a more finished drawing or painting. The Daguerreotype. Determined to make permanent the camera obscura's projected images, Daguerre figured out a way to transfer an object's reflection onto a highly polished copper plate by exposing the plate to light-sensitive chemicals. The image was fixed onto the plate with another substance that stopped the chemical reaction. Daguerreotypes were precious, one-of-a-kind artworks, admired for their exquisite details and rich tonal variations. Unlike today's photographic process, there were no film negatives or digital files, so the artist couldn't make multiple copies. Also, because the surface of a daguerreotype was very delicate and could easily be scratched, people typically covered it with glass and sealed it in a small frame. The daguerreotype process produced mirror images, so any writing in the photo appeared backwards. Yet, surviving daguerreotype examples show non-reverse text. Can you figure out how early photographers accomplished this? Answer. There are two ways by which photographers could produce correctly oriented images. Some aimed the camera at a mirror and photographed the reflection. Others made an initial reversed photograph and then took a picture of that picture. And from this photograph here, since daguerreotype exposures often took several minutes of posing, people's portraits often had serious expressions, which were easier to hold than smiles. Daguerre's The Artist Studio. Daguerre's training as a painter is visible in one of his earliest surviving photographs from 1837. In the artist studio, he arranged a variety of objects in a carefully planned still life composition. Strong diagonal lines frame the picture and draw the viewer's eye into the image. Daguerre's photograph represents a rich spectrum of tonal values, a soft and continuous blending of darks and lights. Explore tonal values activity on the next screen to view a daguerreotype in detail. And here is that famous photograph, The Artist Studio, by Louis Daguerre in 1837. Notice the pure blacks, the pure whites, and the rich variety of tones in between pure black and pure white that give it its depth. Tonal values. The daguerreotype process captures incredibly fine details and can create the illusion of three-dimensional form. Light pours in from the left side of the image, revealing the intricate pattern and texture of the wicker-covered bottle. The broad spectrum of tonal values gives shape to the subtle folds of the curtain. Highlights and shadows reveal the smooth surface of the sculptures and render them three-dimensional. The impact of photography on painting. Well before the invention of photography, artists strove to improve their ability to depict lifelike images of people, places, and objects. Renaissance conventions, such as perspective and observation from nature, were still widely used. Yet, photography opened up a world of new possibilities. Some painters embraced photography as a learning tool to help them translate the three-dimensional world into two dimensions. Others rejected photography as an artistic medium, believing it was a shortcut to traditional artistic representation. They disliked the permanent nature of photographs, which did not allow the artist to alter or rework the image. As photography evolved over time, a synergy developed between artists and photographers. Today, many artists use photographs for inspiration, while photographers use artistic conventions to push their images beyond simple reflections of reality. And in this photo, artists often use photographs as models for portraits or landscapes. Is photography art? People have debated this question since the days when Daguerre produced his first photographs. Some believe the mere act of clicking a shutter requires no artistic talent. Others counter that anyone can draw a picture too, or dab paint on a canvas. Equating snapshots with real photography, they argue, is like comparing refrigerator art to a Rembrandt. What do you think? Joseph Paxton. Just as photography altered the nature of artistic expression, other areas of art and design experienced growth and change during the early 19th century. One of the leaders in architectural innovation was Joseph Paxton. Born in 1803 in Bedfordshire, England, Paxton spent his early years working as a landscape gardener. At the age of 20, he took a position at the prestigious Chiswick Gardens, where his talents caught the eye of the Duke of Devonshire. The Duke eventually appointed Paxton as chief gardener of his family's country estate, Chatsworth House. It was here that Paxton began designing large, glass-covered greenhouses, or conservatories, to accommodate the Duke's vast collection of plants and trees. Here is Joseph Paxton now. He was one of the leaders in architectural innovations in the 19th century. Joseph Paxton's Crystal Palace. Prince Albert, the husband of Queen Victoria, was looking for a way to impress the world and promote Great Britain's industrial power and ingenuity. Soon plans were in the works for a great exhibition to be held in London's Hyde Park in 1851. But this showcase needed a building to house it that was as innovative as the technology displayed inside. Exhibition planners chose Joseph Paxton's pioneering iron and glass building design, which came to be known as the Crystal Palace. Paxton based his proposal on a greenhouse that he had built earlier. Advances in technology during the Industrial Revolution allowed him to create an enormous iron skeleton that held large glass panels. Here is the Crystal Palace in 1851. The past versus the future. The Crystal Palace was widely admired as an example of innovative engineering, yet many critics believed it was not serious architecture because it did not embody any traditional elements of style. It was too unique. More forward-thinking observers saw it as a precursor to an entirely new approach to architecture. Do you think art and architecture need to include reflections of the past in order to be considered authentic? Innovative construction. Paxton broke many architectural traditions with his iron and glass building. He kept the structural supports visible instead of hiding them with stone or plaster walls. The glass wall building blurred the dividing line between the interior and the outside world. Visitors were amazed that such a delicate-looking building could enclose such a massive space. A precursor to modern-day prefab construction, Paxton's design incorporated basic units of mass-produced framing and panels that workers quickly erected in a relatively simple process. The immense building took 2,000 men less than a year to complete. It was dismantled after the Great Exhibition and relocated in the London suburbs. The Crystal Palace survived until 1936, when a fire swept through it and destroyed the palace in a matter of hours. An innovative design, Paxton kept the structural supports of the Crystal Palace visible instead of hiding them within stone or plaster walls. Various architects worldwide have designed structures based on Paxton's Crystal Palace. Ricardo Velázquez Bosco designed this Crystal Palace for El Retiro, a park in Madrid, Spain. Other versions of Paxton's Crystal Palace were built in New York City, Toronto, Rio de Janeiro, Munich, and other cities. The interior. Measuring more than a third of a mile in length, the sprawling Crystal Palace covered 18 acres and provided nearly 1 million square feet of unobscured floor space for exhibits. It had the largest enclosed area of any structure built up to that time. The Crystal Palace also offered the world's first public restrooms. Millions of visitors passed through a series of exhibit halls containing displays of art, machinery, manufacturing, and raw materials. The center transept, which is with its soaring arch, served as a performance space for concerts and was home to a lively circus. Millions of visitors passed through Paxton's 18-acre Crystal Palace after it opened in England in 1851. Quiz. Which of the following are characteristics of the Daguerreotype? Soft edges and blurred imagery? Shallow depth and limited tonal values? Scratchy lines and uneven lighting? Or rich tonal variations and fine details? If you said rich tonal variations and fine details, you are correct.